correspondence. Why? This is what I can't figure out. How did you end up in Atlanta tonight? Why are we talking to you from Atlanta, Georgia, ma'am?
Well, because at the same time that President Trump will be arraigned tomorrow, we will be in federal court over a lawsuit involving the movie 2000 and Mules. So, as luck would have it, here we are.
Well, I don't think that's luck. Is that providential? Seriously, you can't. By the way, if we were scriptwriters and pitched that as part of this overall drama, and oh yeah, Gregg and Katherine are going to be there at the same time Trump is in the same federal court, that's where you get thrown out of the room. I mean, what are the odds of this? You're there for which. By the way, so here's the key: is that Katherine and Gregg. There's other people too coming from other directions, but they basically have the receipts of how Georgia was stolen. This shows you what a sham this thing with Trump is. They actually have the receipts. Of course, Bill Barr says they have nothing, but that even reinforces the fact you've got a lot. Talk to me. What do you say, federal court? What are you guys doing tomorrow, Katherine?
Tomorrow is a hearing in the case where we will have the opportunity to present a motion to dismiss. And we'll see how it goes. Both sides get to argue, and we're about 3-4 blocks away from where it'll all be happening with the president, and it should be one for the history books.
Gregg, you guys have sent us some material. I think Memphis, so you can put it up. The question I just have to you, because the whole world is going to be watching tomorrow in Atlanta with President Trump now, I think up to 91 indictments and 700 years in prison. Is there any doubt in your mind, and do you believe you have the evidence you can show the American people that the election in Georgia was stolen, sir?
Yes. President Trump was right. Katherine spent she's been, most people don't know this about Katherine, but she's a perfectionist. And so as we're approaching all of our research and all of the things we do, Katherine, insists on, her mantra with us is, you can't be wrong. You can't be wrong. You can't be wrong. And with everything that's been going on for the last couple of years, we finally sat down after the Trump indictments here last week or so. Last Friday, we finally sat down for 3 days in a row and really built the timeline around this. And what we found was so shocking and so stunning. We announced parts of it on Katherine's show on Monday night. And we just wanted to get with you, Steve, and really walk you through the heart. When we say President Trump was right, what I'm saying is he had the courage and the discernment to understand that he shouldn't be listening to the Bill Barrs of the world, the Brad Raffenspergers of the world, and all of these folks. And he was listening to people. We look back at the transcripts of that call, and we see some specific and absolute lies that were told to him. But he stood up. He stood strong, and he stood up tall for not just himself and his administration, but for America and the people.
Could you take a minute? Could you walk us through just maybe an outline of the timeline, what you're talking about? Because here's what's ironic or providential. You guys are in federal court, and you have the receipts to show that the Georgia election was stolen. And here we have a guy who was president of the United States and will be president of the United States again, being arraigned basically next door in that federal court for the crime of contesting that election. That's what's so bizarre about this. And quite frankly, it has to be providential you're there. So just when you say the discernment in the timeline, can you just walk us through a couple of key items?
Katherine, why don't you take a shot at this? This is
sure.
This is your story.
Sure. Well, most people don't necessarily know this, but Georgia hadn't cleaned its voter rolls in over a year coming into the 2020 election. That's because in 2019, Fair Fight, which is Stacey Abrams and Mark Elias, sued the state of Georgia to prevent them from cleaning their rolls. That case went on in federal court through the spring of 2021. And during that entire period of time, the state did not clean the voter rolls. And so in the aftermath of 2020, we were being inundated with calls from Georgians saying, the runoff is coming up. Is there anything we can do? The rolls were such a problem. The bringing in of proper electors was so problematic in the general. Is there anything we can do to make sure that this is a better process in the runoff? And so we dove into Georgia law and realized that, in fact, there is a provision in state code called an elector challenge. And the long and the short of it is, we went through the voter rolls and we recognized that just based on residency, there were 364,000 ineligible voter records. So with that as a premise, I went to go and meet with Secretary Raffensperger. And here's where things get interesting, because he had already certified the election November 20th. I went and met with him December the 16th. And in that meeting was Secretary Raffensperger and many of his staff and others. And we talked about what True the Vote was helping Georgia citizens do by way of filing these elector challenges. And I said, this is a huge number, and it's going to leave a mark, and I'm just letting everybody know it's coming. And Secretary Raffensperger, I'll never forget it, pulled out a piece of paper, kind of back on the napkin, did a little bit of quick math and said, yeah, 364,000, about 14% of Americans move every year. We haven't been able to clean the rolls because of this lawsuit. So yeah, that sounds about right. That's about how many ineligible records there are. But what they didn't do in certifying and recertifying and all of the audits and all of the things, all of the great efforts that they say they went through, they never went back to look and see how those 364,000 ineligible voters voted. And so now what we know is that 67,000 of them did vote. Flash forward, he's on that call, the fateful call between Secretary Raffensperger and President Trump and others on January the 2nd. And on that call, he knew, because we had just had the meeting 2 weeks previous, he had already affirmed our methodology, affirmed our numbers. And Steve, what's more, told me, sounds about right. The GOP should have been doing this all along. So it was a cover-up. And when he got on that call...
But hang on one second.
Absolutely.
Hang on. Before we get there, I got the 364, and he concurred with that. How did you get to the 67,000 of the that is the don't bury the lead here, baby. How did you get the 67,000 of the 364 that actually voted?
Sure, you pull the voter histories and you see who voted in 2020. That's who voted. I mean, you can look at the records that were still on the rolls that were ineligible, and you will see just how it breaks out. Some 47,000 of them were outside of their jurisdiction. Over 16,000 of them had already moved out of the state. Over 8,000 of them were totally inactive. It's all there. I mean, if they had been good stewards of the rolls, they would have seen that themselves. But they were so quick to obfuscate and say it was all a big lie, rather than looking at what had happened in the 2 years that they hadn't cleaned the rolls. And they should have looked.
They lied to Trump, Steve. They lied to everybody. They lied to America. They lied to Georgians. They lied to everybody. 67,284 people that were ineligible to vote cast ballots in Georgia in November 3rd of 2020. So everything that you've heard from Bill Barr to Brad Raffensperger and everyone else saying, there's nothing to see here. Just give up the ghost here. Walk away from this, President Trump. He was right to stand tall. He was right to stand up. President Trump was right. They were wrong.
Absolutely. Absolutely correct.
Okay, hang on. I just want to make sure we get this. Raffensperger knew the 364. The 364 was inaccurate, or it was ineligible. Did he also know that 67,000 voted, almost 20% of the ineligible voted? And can those ineligible, when they vote, can they do a contingent vote to say, hey, my registration was in a different county, but I can update it? Is that 67,000 a good hard number of people that should not have voted and the voted should not have counted, given their perceived ineligibility of the 364?
Yes, that's a clean number. And if he wasn't doing that kind of an assessment, he certainly presented as though they had on that call with President Trump when the president was going through line by line. Well, what about this? What about that? And time after time was told, no, there's nothing to see here. There are no problems. We've looked at everything. I beg to differ.
They never.
Okay,
Somebody's covering up something.
They never look.
Hang on, but it didn't. You didn't have to look. It's got to be on a dashboard, or this has to be somewhere. You had three prominent people. You had Raffensperger, but you also had the Bill Barr, who told Trump that he had gotten a report. He had asked the field office down in Atlanta of the U.S. attorney, and they had come back with nothing. Plus, you had Kemp, and I think even the attorney general. You had every senior elected official. All of those people, I might add, are all Republicans. So, Katherine, how could that possibly happen? This wasn't a number you had to dig out. That number should have been up in their grill, ma'am.
I would agree. As the stewards of the Georgia vote, that should have absolutely been front and center for them. But I will say that in our experience with the people that you just named, we've had less than accurate outcomes with their involvement and with their awareness and with their willingness to tell the truth. So this doesn't shock us, but when we put the timeline together, and it just rings in my ears when Raffensperger said, yeah, that looks about right. They should have been cleaning the rolls all along, when that was his responsibility. But he took a knee to Stacey Abrams, didn't do it. And, and here we are today in Atlanta, Georgia, because of it.
But hang on. As bad as, and that's a terrible answer, don't get me wrong, but as bad as saying, hey, 14%, move around the country, yeah, that's about right. That's if your second number was 0, I wouldn't have such a big problem with the 364 being a number. I don't like it. I wonder. The problem is 20% of those cast a vote. That's the problem.
That's right.
So what is he?
That's right.
And here's what I don't understand also. We go through remember the whole fight over this, all the fighting we were doing was that state legislatures have to certify this. And there was an issue in Pennsylvania, in Georgia, in Arizona, in Wisconsin, right, and in Michigan about the certification process. And people actually, the state legislators wanted, in Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth, they wanted 10 days to kind of sort this thing out, just to go through it, to make sure that they had done the certification right. In the certification process, is Raffensperger legally liable because he certified this and then he went to the state legislature who accepted that as a certification by the Secretary of State, ma'am?
I don't know if he's legally liable or not. He is certainly responsible to the voters of Georgia, and he let them down in a big way and misrepresented. It's a shocking truth that voter rolls are so poorly maintained.
It's the key.
That the facts of who voted, it's absolutely the key. The facts of who voted in 2020, let me give you a shocking statistic. As of March 1st, 2021, only 11 states had made their rolls public to confirm who had voted in 2020. It's why we had to drop our lawsuits, because there was not available data. So this whole idea that you can do hand recounts is ridiculous if you don't know who voted.
Exactly. The courts were demanding, Steve, that the courts were demanding everyone that was in court. Look, they were saying, and rightly, we don't want to see your statistics. We don't care about all the machines. We don't care about any of that. What we want to know is who voted and what were the ineligible votes. But the states couldn't tell anyone until the spring. So, in essence, Raffensperger certified it, and he didn't even know the answer. All he was like, okay, yeah, well, they say the count's right, so here we go.
Look,
no one ever went back and looked.
This problem did not come overnight. Kemp was the Secretary of State for 8 years. That's why you see he's got no motivation to get to the bottom of it. Please explain, Katherine, why Stacey Abrams and Fair Fight, why would you even have a lawsuit about something as logical as just cleaning up the voter rolls to make sure that people that are registered to vote actually live where they say they're going to live, and so there's no doubt it's a legal, legitimate, certifiable vote? Why would somebody go to court to fight that, ma'am?
Great question, because when she ran for governor against Kemp and lost, she claimed that it was due to the rolls having been purged in a racially biased fashion. And so she sued the state on that account. Ultimately, the state won in 2021. Now they can resume cleaning the rolls. But in the interim, that challenge process that I described that we took on, they came after us and sued us. We're now headed to trial in October with Fair Fight and Stacey Abrams and Mark Elias over the same thing. Why, as you rightly say, why is it so bad to have accurate voter rolls? And the answer is because if you know where the sleeper cells are, you can easily subvert a process because our certification is set up so that no one ever checks.
Don't bury the lead. You got the head demon, Mark Elias. Mark Elias has had his hand in this? Mark Elias has had his hand in this?
Absolutely. In fact, when we went and announced that we were going to file those 364,000 challenges, he sent a letter from Perkins Coie at the time to every county in Georgia saying, if you take up True the Vote's challenges, we will sue you. So we followed up with the letter to every county saying, if you get sued, we will defend you. And here we are now in court these many years later. The gateway to election fraud is the rolls.
Amen. 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 Katherine, how do people get to you and to get to this information and following on social media? Because you're going to start early tomorrow morning. We want to track it throughout the day. So where do people go?
Absolutely. They can go to truethevote.org or find us on Truth Social or Twitter at True the Vote. But to see the report, and it's called The Aftermath, and it's in a special collection that we've put together on Open Ink. You can go to open.ink/Georgia, and you will see a timeline. You will see a host of documents. And we have a almost hour-long video that Gregg and I put together of our whole story in Georgia. And it's far more than just this. It's got a whole cast of characters with names that you will know that have not been telling the full truth.
Steve, we also, on Open Ink, we've also posted, it's a searchable engine. We've posted the entire Georgia voter history file on there for everybody to go look for themselves. You don't have to believe us. Go look for yourself.
Okay, I want everybody to get into this tonight because this is, when you go through this material, you realize when President Trump says the perfect phone call, it's pretty close to being perfect. And think about this. Think of what when you go through it and look and go through the timeline. When you hear Raffensperger's responses, Raffensperger's in on it. There's no doubt he's in on it. You couldn't. The 67,000 it sits up there as a burning issue. How did those people possibly vote? And more importantly, brother, how did you count them? How could these possibly be counted? They're ineligible. And you admitted they're ineligible. So how possibly could almost 18% of your ineligible the registrations being ineligible, if they're ineligible, and you concurred with that in the room with them, that, yeah, that's approximately right. How could 67,000 possibly vote? This is what's driving people crazy. This shows you. Yeah, go ahead, brother.
Steve, last piece. This is super important. They were in court. They were being sued over this issue. They were arguing our point that the rolls needed to be cleaned. It's just once the election occurred and they declared Trump lost, they certified the thing and never said to anyone, but the rolls haven't been cleaned. They're dirty. We need to look at them.
That's the key. That's what I'm saying. They're in on the fix. And Kemp's.
And they never thought we'd come back and look. Just like the surveillance video with the drop boxes, they never thought anybody would look.
Gregg, I think you mentioned she was a perfectionist. They never figured they were going to meet Catherine Engelbrecht. That's a tough one. She's tough as boot leather.
None of us did.
Don't get Catherine Engelbrecht. Don't get Catherine Engelbrecht in your business, man. I mean, in your things. She's a terror. Good Lord. How do the people get to Open Ink, Gregg? How do they get there?
It's open.ink. Open.ink. Look at the special collections. We've got one on Connick. We've got one on John G. Trump. And we've got this newest one on Georgia. There's a ton of information in there. We're going to be dropping 25 hours of video on top of it. It's a dynamic collection, and we're going to be dumping more and more and more data. We even have a special component being added to this. We have copies of checks that were paid to the mules. We have video of the mules cashing those checks, and we know where the money came from, and we know who it was. And that'll be coming soon as well.
And I want you to remember this. In fact, I'm going to cut this up and play it tomorrow during our coverage of President Trump. I want you to remember when President Trump goes down there, and Fani Willis and Roethlisberger, the whole crowd of them, I want you to remember this. And what's the reality there? Then you understand this has nothing to do with reality. They understand. This is why they fought so hard. They understand that Georgia was stolen. Full stop. Jack Smith, J6 that. Full stop. Joe Biden is an illegitimate president of the United States. I have said it from mid-November when he was declared the winner, all the way through when he took the oath of office to this very day, and I've not backed off 1 inch. You know why? The election was stolen. And it's people like Greg Phillips and Catherine Engelbrecht have proven this time and again. Guys, thank you so much. Thank you for taking time. I know you're the lawyers today getting ready for tomorrow, so thank you. We'll follow this closely.
Thanks, Steve.
Remember, these two went to jail. They were thrown in a frickin' prison.